What is, the difference between a life of just constant grinding friction and a life of total abundance? What if it has absolutely nothing to do with your daily habits?
Right, or your schedule, or even your bank account.
Yeah, exactly. What if instead it actually comes down to a literal mathematical frequency, like a frequency that your consciousness is broadcasting in this exact second?
I mean, we are just so accustomed to measuring our lives by, well, material output. We constantly look at tasks completed, money earned, hours slept.
The classic hustle culture metrics.
Right, but the framework we are exploring in today's deep dive bypasses the material entirely. It attempts to quantify the invisible, basically.
Which is wild, and this is all based on a translated text from August 2024 by an author named Feng, right? It's called Eight Paths to Elevate the Frequency of Life.
Yes, and the central premise of this text is that every single living thing in the universe possesses a specific measurable frequency.
And for you listening right now, whether you approach this as, literal metaphysics, or if you just choose to view it as a really sophisticated philosophical metaphor for personal growth, this framework is going to fundamentally challenge how you think about your inner state.
It really does. It reframes everything.
So our mission today is to map out where humanity actually sits on this cosmic scale. And then we want to decode the mechanics of how we, level up our spiritual vibration.
Well, to do that, we first need to define the terminology. Because Feng establishes that the center of life, and he spells that with a capital L-I-F-E in the text, is the soul.
Right. The capital letters make it feel very absolute.
Exactly. And the soul is, in its purest form, consciousness. So when the text discusses a life frequency, it is strictly analyzing the frequency of consciousness.
Okay, got it.
It is not talking about the physical vibration of your vocal cords or like the atomic hum of your cells.
That distinction is so crucial because, if we look at a boulder sitting out in a field, physics tells us the atoms inside that rock are vibrating, right?
Right, they have physical movement.
Yeah, but under this specific framework, that rock does not possess a life frequency. We are measuring the capacity for awareness, the density of perception, really, not just the movement of matter.
Yeah. And to give this abstract concept a real structural backbone, the author brings in Dr. David Hawkins' scale of consciousness energy levels.
Which is fascinating. I love that he pulls in Hawkins.
It grounds it perfectly.
Yeah.
For context, Dr. Hawkins was a psychiatrist and researcher who developed this logarithmic scale. He mapped human consciousness basically from 1 to 1,000.
And the lower numbers are the heavy stuff, right?
Exactly. Lower numbers correlate with states like shame, guilt, and apathy. In those states, consciousness is contracted. It's heavy.
Yeah, you literally feel weighed down.
Right. And as the numbers increase, consciousness expands. It moves through courage and reason, ultimately reaching states like love, peace, and enlightenment up near the top of the scale.
The logarithmic nature of that scale is kind of the key to understanding the mechanics here, I think. Because an increase of 1 point isn't just a tiny incremental step up.
No, not at all.
It represents an exponential leap in power and awareness. And Feng takes this concept and applies it to a universal hierarchy. The text actually maps it out numerically.
Yeah, starting all the way down with plants.
Right. Plants operate in the single digits. They have a rudimentary awareness of, sunlight and water. Then animals operate in the tens. They have instinct, emotion, mobility.
And then there's us, humanity.
Yeah, humanity, in our current default state anyway, operates in the hundreds. It's almost like the universe is a massive radio dial.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right, like a rock isn't on the dial at all, a plant is on AM radio, animals are maybe like early FM, and humans are on standard FM.
And the higher beings are broadcasting in ultra-high definition satellite radio because the scale extends far beyond the human baseline into these unseen realms.
So who is on the satellite radio?
Well, above humanity, the text places angels, celestials, and Buddhas, and they are operating in the thousands.
Wow, thousands.
Yeah. And then gods vibrate in the tens of thousands. And the absolute, or the greatest creator, peaks in the billions.
The billions. The progression feels akin to upgrading a data connection. Plants are passing a single byte of data, just enough to survive. Animals are on dial-up.
Yep, the old screechy modem.
Exactly. And humans have broadband. We can process complex ideas, build entire cities, experience existential dread. But these higher beings, they are operating on a fiber optic network so massive that a single ping contains the data of an entire
That
galaxy.
is exactly how the text frames it.
So the immediate question then becomes, if humanity is currently anchored in the hundreds on this bandwidth scale, how do we actually tune the dial? What is a required threshold to break into those higher networks?
The author actually provides very specific numerical targets for that. To transcend the human cycle and enter what the text defines as the lowest heavenly state, a consciousness has to maintain a minimum frequency of 500 hertz.
500. Okay, so we have to jump from the low hundreds up to 500 just to get in the door.
Right. And if you want to access mid-level heaven, the barrier to entry is 600 hertz.
And the highest levels?
To reach the highest levels of heaven, you basically have to shatter the hundreds entirely. You have to sustain a frequency of 5,000 hertz and beyond.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most fascinating structural quirk of this entire text.
The missing paths.
Yes, the title explicitly promises 8 paths to elevate the frequency of life. So as a reader, you are totally conditioned to expect a highly tactical checklist.
You want the quick fix.
Completely. You anticipate bullet points telling you to, I don't know, meditate for 30 minutes, adopt a specific vegan diet, or chant a particular mantra so you can hit that 500 hertz mark. But Shuofeng completely bypasses the tactical.
He refuses to offer a behavioral shortcut. Because, according to this framework, behavioral hacks only alter the surface.
Right?
You cannot reach 500 hertz by performing a ritual if the underlying engine of your mind is still generating a frequency of 200 hertz.
It's like putting a spoiler on a tractor. It doesn't make it a race car.
Exactly. So instead of a simple checklist of actions, the text outlines a radical restructuring of our fundamental qualities. It focuses entirely on the cognitive evolution required to change the machine that actually generates the frequency.
And the starting line for that restructuring is a concept the text calls cultivating the inner garden of your soul.
I love that phrase.
Me too. Rather than treating the mind as a machine to be, perfectly optimized, it is framed as an ecosystem. You have to actively curate what takes root in your consciousness.
Yes, and the text doesn't leave us with just a poetic metaphor either. It breaks down the actual mechanics of this cultivation by detailing an 8-stage sequence for upgrading human thought.
It's like upgrading the operating system of your brain.
Right. We have to evolve our perception of reality step by step. The baseline stage, where the vast majority of human consciousness currently resides, is called material thinking.
Okay, material thinking. What does that look like?
In this state, perception is entirely bound by the 5 physical senses. Reality is only what can be touched, weighed, or measured. It is very rigid, Newtonian cause and effect.
So operating purely in material thinking is what keeps a frequency anchored in the lower hundreds. You perceive yourself as an isolated object navigating a world of other, totally isolated objects.
Exactly. And to elevate the frequency, the mind must transition to the second stage, which is image-based thinking.
Image-based, so moving away from what we can physically touch.
Yes, image-based thinking is the initial uncoupling from the physical world. It is the ability to close your eyes and conjure the exact shape, color, and texture of an apple without an apple actually being in the room.
The mind begins to realize it can generate reality internally, independent of external sensory input.
Right. And once that internal generation is established, the mind advances to the third stage, associative thinking.
This is where pattern recognition emerges, right?
Exactly. You stop looking at the apple as an isolated image, and you begin connecting it to gravity, to the season of autumn, to the concept of nourishment. You start building a web of relationships between totally distinct ideas.
And that web serves as the launchpad for the fourth stage, which the text calls illusory thinking.
Now, the word illusory often carries a negative connotation, right? Like being delusional or detached from reality.
That's just making things up.
But in this specific framework, it represents a profound leap in frequency. Illusory thinking is the capacity to conceptualize something that has absolutely no precedent in the material world.
Oh, wow. So pure imagination.
Yes, at the realm of pure, potential, myth, and abstract philosophy. You are no longer constrained by the physics of what is.
Consider the architectural design of a massive skyscraper. Before a single piece of steel is ever forged, the entire structure has to exist in the realm of the illusory.
That's a perfect example.
The architect has to see something completely invisible. But to make it real, they have to pull that illusion forward into the fifth stage, which is visualized thinking.
Right, the application of intent. The mind takes the raw, boundless energy of the illusion and gives it specific architecture, parameters, and direction.
So you go from daydreaming to drawing the actual blueprints.
Exactly. And then the transition from visualized thinking to the sixth stage, which is Tai Chi thinking, is perhaps the most difficult leap.
Tai Chi thinking, that implies balance, right?
Yes, but it's more than that. Tai Chi thinking requires the mind to hold contradictions without experiencing cognitive dissonance. It is the deep understanding of duality.
Like light and dark, creation and destruction, form and void.
Exactly. Instead of viewing these opposites as a conflict to be resolved, Tai Chi thinking perceives them as a necessary, interdependent dance. You stop fighting the current and begin to understand the flow of the entire river.
That acceptance of flow, it kind of dissolves the rigid boundaries of perception, right? Which pulls the consciousness into the seventh stage non-form thinking.
Yes. If visualized thinking was the act of building the architectural blueprint, non-form thinking is the realization that the empty space inside the building is just as vital as the walls themselves.
The mind stops fixating on the vessel or the structure or even the ego and tunes entirely into the pure energy or essence occupying that space.
Which culminates in the absolute pinnacle of cognitive evolution, holographic thinking.
Holographic thinking. Okay, what happens when a person finally achieves this highest tier of thought?
To understand the mechanics of this, consider the difference between looking at a single pixel on a screen and zooming out to view a massive, high-resolution photograph.
Okay. In material thinking, you are basically convinced you are just one pixel. You think you are completely separate from the red pixel next to you.
Right. But in holographic thinking, you recognize that the nature of a true hologram is that every single fragment contains the exact image of the whole.
The boundary between the internal and the external just collapses.
Completely. A consciousness operating in holographic thinking perceives that the entire architecture of the cosmos is reflected within their own mind, and their mind is inextricably woven into the cosmos. There is no separation.
And when a mind processes reality through that lens, the frequency naturally soars past the human baseline of the hundreds and breaks into the thousands.
Exactly. It's effortless at that point.
So we have tracked the internal mechanics of this evolution, but we need to examine how this high-frequency state actually manifests in human behavior. Like, how does a person in the thousands act at a coffee shop?
Well, if someone successfully transitions from material to holographic thinking, the text explicitly states the ultimate behavioral result is characterized by three traits: unselfishness, selflessness, and non-attachment.
Non-attachment is always the big one in these philosophies.
Because the mechanics of non-attachment are the absolute secret to maintaining a high frequency. Attachment to the material world, whether that is a fixation on wealth, a desperate need to control how others perceive us, or an obsession with specific outcomes, acts as a heady gravitational drag on consciousness.
It pulls you right back down.
Yes, it forces the mind to regress back to material thinking, dropping the frequency down into the low hundreds.
The text actually highlights a really beautiful paradox regarding this drag. It states that achieving a state of owning nothing yet possessing everything is the precise key to entering the higher realms of heaven.
Let's unpack the logic of that paradox because it's brilliant. When you operate in material thinking, owning requires defense.
Yeah, if you own a piece of land, you have to build a fence. You have to patrol the borders, worry about trespassers, pay taxes on it.
Exactly. The act of ownership consumes your energy. But in holographic thinking, you realize you are not separate from the land, the air, or the people around you.
You drop the illusion of ownership entirely.
Right. And by doing so, you gain access to the abundance of the entire system without the energetic cost of defending it. You possess the beauty of the entire ocean because you have stopped trying to hoard a single bucket of water.
I love that. Owning nothing, possessing everything. But, the text makes one final striking claim about the nature of this frequency that we really have to talk about.
The perception aspect.
Yes.
Yeah.
It asserts that the specific hertz of your consciousness is not some private, invisible metric.
Yeah.
It is actively radiating from you and is deeply perceptible to others. The author argues that in just a brief passing interaction, an individual can sense another person's vibrational frequency.
And honestly, we experience the mechanics of this constantly, even if we just dismiss it as a gut feeling or a vibe.
Oh, totally. You walk into a room and instantly feel a heavy, suffocating tension before anyone even speaks.
Or you sit next to a stranger on a train, and despite exchanging only, basic pleasantries, you leave the conversation feeling inexplicably lighter and more energized.
Mm-hmm.
The text argues this is not just a psychological reaction. It is literally your consciousness reading the hertz output of their consciousness.
But Zhuefeng pushes this concept much, much further. He states that by sensing this frequency, one can actually identify a person's cosmic trajectory.
Yes, that is a huge leap.
Right. The text implies that a highly attuned individual can interact with someone and immediately perceive whether their consciousness is bound for the heavenly states, destined for continued human reincarnation, or even descending into lower realms like the animal realm.
The implications of that claim really require careful navigation.
I mean, I have to push back slightly to encourage some critical thought here, because if we take that concept at face value, it sounds like a blueprint for spiritual elitism.
It can definitely be misread that way.
Right. Like if I understand this framework and I sense a heavy, low-frequency vibration from the person serving me coffee, the immediate temptation is to judge them. It invites this mindset of, well, their consciousness is vibrating at 150 hertz. They are trapped in material thinking, and they are headed for the animal realm. So how do we utilize this concept of perception without turning it into a metaphysical caste system?
That is the exact trap that keeps a person anchored in the lower frequencies.
Oh, the judgment itself lowers your frequency.
Absolutely. The moment you judge another person's frequency as a permanent stain on their soul, you have instantly regressed back to material, isolated thinking. You have just rebuilt the wall, separating your pixel from their pixel.
Wow, okay, that makes perfect sense.
This is precisely why the author integrates Dr. Hawkins' energy scale as the reference point for these interactions. The scale is a diagnostic instrument, not a gavel.
So the distinction lies in diagnosing the temporary state versus judging the permanent identity.
Correct. If you interact with someone broadcasting a dense 150 hertz frequency, Dr. Hawkins' scale provides the context that they're currently operating from a state of anger or fear. They're temporarily tangled in the lower stages of associative or material thinking.
And recognizing that should foster profound compassion rather than judgment.
Exactly. You understand that their consciousness is struggling under heavy gravitational drag. Furthermore, perceiving their frequency actually acts as a mirror for your own.
Yeah, how so?
Well, if you find yourself constantly drained and irritated by low-frequency interactions, it demands an audit of your own inner garden. What frequency are you broadcasting that harmonizes with that density?
Oh, that is brilliant. That reorients the entire concept from a tool of judgment to an instrument of extreme self-awareness. It reminds us that moving from the tens to the hundreds to the thousands is not a fixed destiny. It is a dynamic, shifting process that requires relentless daily cultivation.
Which brings us right back to the core utility of Zhuefeng's text. We have traced the architecture of consciousness from its lowest material roots to its highest holographic expressions. We have examined the mathematical thresholds required to break through human limitations and enter heavenly states.
And we decoded the mechanical necessity of non-attachment, understanding that dropping the exhausting defense of the material ego is really the only way to allow the natural buoyancy of consciousness to rise.
And for you listening, the immediate value of this deep dive isn't found in constantly trying to calculate your exact numerical Hertz score today.
No, don't walk around with a calculator.
Right. The value is in recognizing the cognitive stages you navigate every single day. When you catch yourself obsessing over a material slight, you now have the framework to consciously pull your mind into image, associative, or eventually Tai Chi thinking.
You possess the architectural blueprint to intentionally reduce your mental friction. By recognizing the drag of attachment, you can actively prune the inner guarding of your soul, creating the necessary space for higher-level awareness to take root.
Exactly. It's an active daily practice.
We began this exploration looking for a clean, objective way to measure the human soul. But what we uncovered instead is that we are the ones standing in the control room. We are constantly turning the dial on our own frequency through the depth of our perception.
We're the architects of our own frequency.
So I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over, something that builds upon the reality of how these energies interact in our physical world. If Zhuefeng is right, and the trajectory of our consciousness is truly perceptible to others even in the briefest, most mundane moments of our day, what unseen frequency are you inadvertently broadcasting to the people around you right now? Long before you speak a single word, long before you explain your intentions or defend your actions, what is the silent music of your consciousness telling the world about exactly where you are going?